Kerala is trying to rebuild itself from the aftermath of what has been the worst floods that the state has witnessed in the last 100 years. And even as the centre, the state governments, NGOs focus on rehabilitating the lakhs of people who've lost their homes, we take a closer look at the culture of giving in India. There are numerous organisations that have stepped in and are trying to get relief to Kerala. Number of individuals doing exactly the same thing. But outside of that, the question that we're trying to ask today is, what can we do to institutionalize a culture of giving? 2% CSR spend has been made mandatory for corporates, but are corporates really doing enough? Or is forced philanthropy dealing with its own constraints? Also, is it time to take the entrepreneurial route when it comes to the art of giving? Joining me today for this conversation, Sudha Murty, chairperson of the Infosys Foundation, Atul Satija, founder and CEO of Nudge Foundation, here with me. Thanks very much for joining us, Mrs. Murty. Let me start by asking you, because you and the Infosys Foundation are one of the organizations that have been at the forefront of providing relief work in the aftermath of the Kerala floods. In fact, today, I believe, is the end of phase one of the relief work that you've started at the Infosys Foundation. Give me a sense, ma'am, of what you've been able to put together so far.
Thank you, Shireen. It has been a very hectic week for all of us. We are probably used to working in such relief for a long time. Infosys is 22 years old, Foundation is 22 years old, and it may be 11th or 12th such relief work we are doing. So by this time we know what exactly people need at this time. So we divide the entire work into 3 phases. Phase 1, immediately what they want, survival kit we call. Phase 2, welcome home kit, kit we call. Phase 3, where we would like to do something more than that. So we are in this phase 1, and we worked with the survival kits now.
Okay, you're in phase 1. Survival kits have been packed and are now being dispatched to Kerala. Can you give me a sense of how you're partnering with state agencies, with government agencies, to ensure that the relief material that you have been able to put together at the Infosys Foundation actually gets to the beneficiaries that require these most?
Well, I have observed one thing in the last 22 years. The first time when I started relief work to this 11th or 12th, I can make out there's a lot more giving. There are a lot more youngsters who would like to participate physically, economically, and also they would like to give some material. And I'm extremely happy and hopeful because next generation is so generous. At Infosys Foundation, we have our own methodology, our own volunteers will join us, and we have a team of 20 to 22 people. And we buy the material, and we don't give it to any government agency or anything like unknown party. We have our own people in those areas. For example, there is one Swami Japananda who is doing a yeoman service in Pavagada, and who always helps us in such rehabilitation or survival kit distribution. So we give it to him, and he takes personally with his volunteers, stays in a place and distributes. Similarly, there are many organizations whom we know for the last so many years we are working with them. So we directly give it to them, and they will distribute, and we will have the list what they have done with the photograph. So it's so sure, when we give material, it reaches people. I will give an example. We sent our first truck about 2 days back. That truck reached in the night. Next day morning they distributed. Next day afternoon I get a call from the receiver saying that today he had a good meal because we give rice, dal, etc. And he cried on the telephone. That means within 13 to 14 hours the material will reach and people use them. That is the greatest joy we have.
Absolutely. It certainly is heartwarming, ma'am, to hear that. But let me take that across now to Atul Satija, founder of the Nudge Foundation. Atul, several important comments coming in there from Mrs. Murty. One, I think, underscoring the importance of how do you actually try and reach out to people at a time like this. The benefits of apportioning things like survival kits, and then, of course, looking at what needs to be done after the immediate crisis is past, etc. And the second issue is of accountability, of getting partners in place to ensure that the relief material actually reaches the beneficiaries. You've just returned from Kerala. What's been the experience on the ground for you, Atul?
Yeah. So, Shireen, thanks for having me, first of all.
From experience. For example.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I'll just come back to you, Mrs. Murty, in just a second.
From experience.
Yeah. So I think the first and the most important thing is, I think Sudha also alluded to that, which is you first find somebody that you really trust, and usually trust either comes from somebody else having worked with them and you know their work, or you firsthand have worked with that organization before. So for us at Give India, for example, we work with Gunj very, very closely. Gunj is one of the most respected, and they've done a lot of work in disaster across the country over the years. So it is very easy for us to pick a partner that we have known over the years, does a great work, and actually support them of their work on the ground, which takes care of the trust part of it, right? Which we know that we are spending money and the money is actually going to the right people on the ground. The second question is accountability and efficiency. And I think in these times, it is very difficult to be very sure of the efficiency of the spend that is going, right? You're sending material to a relief camp. It's very tough to know when you're sending them, for example, medicine supplies, whether they need 100% of them or 40% of them. And I think usually donors understand that and are okay with that when the relief supplies are reaching somebody. They hope and they wish everything is used. But there is a certain inefficiency at these times that we have to factor in as givers when we give. That's one. And I think people have that understanding and forgivenessness, largely in the cases like disaster. On the ground, when you look at it, I think one of the things that I noticed is that it is probably one of the largest scale people collaboration project that we have seen in India in a very long time. We have seen organizations who are voluntary groups, not even legal organizations. We have seen people who are working across various non-profits, whether it's an orphanage, whether it's an animal rescue group, whether it's a humanitarian organization, whether that's a disaster response organization. We have seen corporates on the ground. We have seen their trucks. We have seen celebrities come together. We have seen CEOs of very large organizations writing personal checks. We have seen lakhs of people as individuals coming forward and writing checks of various kinds. We have seen people with no money, like all the fishermen, they're actually coming there in person and doing volunteering there as well. So I think we need to acknowledge the level of effort that has gone in from everybody across the country to put the effort that's happening on the ground for all the relief work, and initially, obviously, the rescue work. And government's role is a very large one in all of this in terms of not just aggregating resources, but also channeling them on the ground, creating information repository of where the need is, channelizing sort of their people, and that's been really, really amazing for us as we start on the ground.
Well, that certainly is good news. The fact that the social sector, government organizations, individuals, corporates working together, that is the experience that Atul Satija and his team at Give India have seen on ground in Kerala. But if I could pick up on the point that you raised, Atul, because you brought up Gunj, one of your partner organizations, and you're absolutely right. Gunj, like the Infosys Foundation, has been doing this for many, many years in India. And, you know, Anshu Gupta, I remember in a conversation that I had with him, always speaks about the importance of dignity along with charity. So give with dignity is something that Anshu has always spoken to me about. And I want to come to you, Mrs. Murty, on that issue. You know, while issues like accountability and efficiency, etc., as Atul pointed out, in the first few days of rescue and relief, those are issues that donors will probably ignore. But what about the issue of sensitivity, of empathy, of dignity? How do you ensure that we create a culture of giving along with a culture of giving with dignity?
Yeah, because I believe in it, and it has been proven over a period of time, and our Kathopanishad says giving is very important, but giving with a grace, accepting with a grace, and not making the person who receives is a mean and the person who gives is a great person. That is nothing like that. It says, our ancestors have taught us that one, Danam Priyavak Sahitam, Shraddha hi Danam, Ashraddha hi Nadanam. Person who gives should always thank the person who receives. You gave me an opportunity to serve you. Person who receives should not feel less about himself. He should say, look, I have got this one from you, and when time comes, I will give away to many more people, because the giving culture and accepting with grace and giving to someone else, this is like a perennial source, and it's a continuity. So we should not make it something, oh, I gave. No, I don't believe. And dignity is very important. You know, it's like, you know, in a family, you give somebody without even feeling hurt. And you should enjoy giving. Most importantly, you have to enjoy giving. And that makes other person happy. Not someone, okay, take away, take this and get away, useless fellow, and not that way. Take this and may you prosper. Take this and may you prosper. Give me an opportunity to serve you when you are in difficulty. That attitude makes the whole exercise very beautiful and heart-touching and cordial.
Absolutely, it certainly does. But Atul, you know, the point that Mrs. Murty was making on how she sees the youth actually participating and coming forward in large numbers, and that's what we've seen not just in Kerala, but in previous instances as well. What's your experience, and how do you believe we can actually get the youth, the millennials, to engage when it comes to creating this ecosystem of giving?
Yeah. So, Shreed, historically, we've always connected. There is obviously certain correlation of giving with age, right? As people sort of grow, they start looking at money differently, life differently, and we have seen sort of, you know, people at the age bracket of 35 to 40 and beyond have given traditionally more. And we have the data from the Give India sort of history of doing work in India over the last 19 years, also have seen that. Increasingly, what is happening, though, is that most of the kids graduating from colleges now, all of them actually are post-liberalization kids, right? They have seen an optimistic, a fast-growing India. And their ability and comfort to take a punt on their careers, on time, on money, is much, much higher than the people of, you know, the previous generation. In fact, people who also graduated 10 years back did not have that confidence and the room to do that. So that's one very important point that we are seeing manifest in the amount of talent that is looking to come and serve in the social sector, both in terms of money as well as volunteering, but also as the regular careers in the development sector. So that trend is visible. However, I think as Sudha also mentioned, I think there is a lot of work in terms of building higher sensitivity and awareness of how giving needs to happen, that we have to do across all age groups, not just youth. And I think the level of energy that youth is coming out today with, it is largely manifested through volunteering and serving in the sector. But I think giving is something that they are in a very, very early stages of. And it's a good timing for us to work with them to build that sort of culture of giving at scale. I think the other important thing to also highlight is that in India in particular, giving has been very closely associated with religion, because giving historically was linked to religion. And I think there is a lot of data globally that shows that as people slowly sort of start having a broader perspective, migrate more, experience life and sort of geographies more, they start looking at giving as an act in itself, not linked to religion necessarily. And that's a very healthy thing, because then that money also comes with a lot of questions on accountability, which as a donor you may want, but as a religious fanatic you may not really care about, right? The act of giving to religion is an end in itself, but when you give money, you also want to see good work happen.
Sure.
And the younger generation today is bothered about that a lot more, which is a very healthy sign to see impact on the ground happen.
Okay. Well, the important points that you're raising there, of course, this disassociation of giving, which was previously linked to religion, continues perhaps majority to be linked to religion, but you're saying that there is a change in the way that the youth is now spending, and also the fact that they're perhaps a lot more risk-taking as opposed to risk-averse also means that they are actively participating in volunteering and getting engaged with the communities. But Mrs. Murty, you know, one of the important issues that perhaps holds this sector back when we talk about creating this ecosystem of giving is the trust deficit. The government doesn't necessarily trust the social sector. The social sector perhaps doesn't really have enough of a collaborative framework with organizations doing exactly the same sort of work. What can be done to encourage more trust between government and the social sector and within the social sector itself?
Transparency. I feel transparency leads to trust. And sensitivity, transparency and passion. If you know your counterpart also has, then the trust develops. And I have worked with many people, and I have worked on the ground for many years. I myself used to stay there in such calamities, you know, go there and all. Now, what is most important is, it is not the money, it is not the material. You have to give your time. You have to give your time, and the time. When somebody gives time, they realize how hard it is to procure material, carry it, give it to people, see the difficulties. It requires a lot of time. It makes you very mature. Actually, you understand what is life. Life is not only money. Life is not only achievement. Life is not only beauty. Life is much more than that. A great compassion comes out of all these experiences. Then you, whatever happens, you say, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So unless there is with a partner who you want to work, they should have transparency in transactions. What money we have given, how they have spent, what is the overhead, who are the receivers. And the person who receives should not be your relative. It is a trust, it's a great rule which you have set up at Infosys Foundation. No religion, no language, no political party are important to us. They are in need of help, and we can help with our infrastructure. We should do this kind of an attitude with a detachment, without expecting anything from the receiver. And it's not like I scratch your back and you scratch mine. Absolutely nothing. If we don't help such people at this time, they will perish. With this compassion, then only you can have great partners. Who have similar ideology, then only you can have great partners.
Yes, absolutely. Transparency is the key to being able to bring in more accountability. But Atul, before I take a break, I want to ask you about how can we bring some of these efforts to scale? Because there are several organizations who might be doing exactly the same thing, and not each of these organizations will have the capacity, the bandwidth to be able to take this to scale. The problem in India is one of the lack of scale. How do we bring in scale as far as the social sector is concerned?
Yeah, so Shireen, there's a question very, very close to my heart. Sorry. So I think it's a very pertinent question. The way I like to put it is that, you know, if India's best engineers, doctors, lawyers, artists, journalists, if all of them don't come out graduating from colleges wanting to solve India's most meaningful problems, and they are trying to solve India's most lucrative problems, you will not see the large-scale problem solving that we need to see to build a society we all want. So it's very important for us to associate a sense of pride and meaningfulness in good work that exists, but I don't think we talk about that enough. So to me, I think the starting point of scalable problem solving is the best talent of the country coming and looking at solving these problems, and that's not happening right now at scale, right? There are amazing number of super awesome people in the sector, but our best talent is not graduating from all sorts of colleges, or looking at mid-career sort of shift into the development sector and actually solve the problem. There are many check writers, foundations, philanthropists, CSR guys in the corporate world. But within the development sector, we can easily make do with 1,000 times better talent than we have and 1,000 times more talent than we have. So that's one thing that's very important for us to create a sense of pride with the sector. Now, my appeal to all the check writing entities, so to say, is that we need to create capacity of the non-profit sector to be able to afford this talent, not pay premium for good work, which is too much to ask right now, but at least not expect a massive discount to do good work. And I think that narrative has to change, which hasn't changed so far, right? And I think with CSR money, we have seen many organizations being very comfortable taking risk, accepting talent, even being okay with paying them meaningful salaries for them to be in the sector and stay. I think that's one narrative that we need to build, which is missing right now at scale. The second thing is that we also need to change the conversation when we discuss non-profits from their character to capability, right? Obviously, there are a lot of non-profits which may not be clean. We can question their work. We question how they work, their efficiency. But there is a very large number of non-profits that are really credible, doing amazing work and have good talent. But even they are colored with the same sort of stroke of brush by saying that, prove your character first before we talk about your capability. So I think generally a narrative of top talent and a narrative of sort of capability of a non-profit, right? The conversation needs to change to what can you do? Can you scale? Do you have systems, quality? Are you taking risk? Are you innovating? How will you look at it? Put a quality lab, put an innovation lab. There are no job portals. There are no incubators. There are no accelerators. There are no seed funding. So the whole infrastructure of the sector needs to be built. And I think that is starting to happen with CSRs and foundations starting to see things differently now.
Okay, great. On that note, we'll take a break, and when we return, I will get Sudha Murty to respond to the comments that came in from Atul Satija on how we can build scale as well as capability in the non-profit or the development sector. That and more. And we'll talk about crowdsourcing and online funding with Ketto. That's coming up for you after this very short break.